Week update. We are joined by the lady at the center of everything, the end of the session here, Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, no problem.
So, lots of parliamentary stuff, but this might be the best forum to actually go through some of that.
Sure.
You have, of the things that I know about you, you are pro life.
True.
Like some people, everybody says they're pro life, right? Hell, everybody does. Trust me. Even Cornman here probably says he's pro life. You actually are pro life. How'd you come to those beliefs to be so strong?
So my very first memories were at a Right to Life rally on the steps of the Capitol building. I have been an advocate for ending abortion since I was a little kid. Somebody I remember explaining to me what that was and what that meant. And I was so horrified that anybody would do that. And then as I got older, as a woman, the arguments just didn't seem to make sense. Like nobody else has to sacrifice their children for their success. And I just thought, this is crazy that we live in a world that people are asked to choose between doing meaningful work and if this whole idea that women can't have children and also be successful. And I believe truly that we can protect women and the unborn, and we don't know what the future holds for each individual person. And so we've got to, if we mean it, if we care about people, then we've got to care for the people who don't have a voice. And to me, there's nobody who has less of a voice than someone who literally has no voice.
Dave Clemens explained to me one time the difference in folks that get elected and they are pro-life. The people that passionately, it's one of the reasons they ran. Everybody's not going to run for the same reason. That's not how the system's set up. But I always thought like you have a resume of legislative success. And if you talk to you outside of politics, you talk about abortion policy.
Well, most people bring it up. People bring it up to me all the time. But yeah,
when you're talking about issues, that's something. It's real. It's not just Twitter. It's not just Facebook. It's not just on the Senate floor. It's not election time. You're actually pro-life.
Yeah, and I think honestly, it is the only thing for me, at least, that's worth the level of vitriol and hate that comes with the jobs, right? Like I think all that stuff.
I think you catch a lot of shit from everybody else because of. I wouldn't just say how pro-life you are. I would say you've been successful at affecting pro-life policies,
right?
Which makes you take buckets of shit from people that are pro-choice, or just assholes,
and other people who just would rather be able to claim they are when they're not.
There are plenty of pro-life assholes, but they're also pro-choice assholes, and I think you catch their shit because you've delivered some stuff.
Yeah,
and I think you're a woman. I honestly think
probably.
I have a lot of friends that have very liberal views. A lot of them smarter than me. I think you catch more hell from it because you're a woman than they would give to Nick Schroer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Nick.
I was thinking you're more effective advocate for the pro-life cause because you're a woman.
Probably. I tend to not
Kelton's not as good an advocate.
I tend to not play gender politics, but I do think that's whatever. I don't know why people.
The left plays gender politics more than the right, and I think when they play it, I think you catch some help. Let's talk about this bill. So you were obviously the person to handle this. So right now the pro-abortion folks have an IP. They declined to sign. Apparently, people did not decline to sign. They signed. So it's going to go on the ballot. They've tried to set it up where it'll go on in November, but I think there's a little play, probably some left-handed moves they could make to squeeze it into August. But whatever, it's going to the ballot. Let's assume. Yeah. So you guys want to change the rules on how to do that and make it harder. I just don't know anybody, a fair-minded person. I bet if we got Chuck Hatfield kind of drunk, he might agree some days, like he has, that it should be a little harder to change the Constitution. A little harder, right? So you come up with a way to make it.
I tend to not use Chuck as a reasonable person standard, but I know we disagree on that.
Well, he's a fellow barrister, so you understand the arguments.
He makes good arguments, but they're compelling even, but I don't find them persuasive.
One of the rare people that can make good arguments in the appellate court and on Twitter. That is a rare lawyer that can do both. I've seen lawyers that can do good Twitter and bad arguments.
He's certainly found a way to monetize that well.
Yes, very good. Using myself. So you want to make it a little harder. And part of that, I mean, I think you just...
No, I mean, listen, I just think rural voices need to have a say. I know you're a strong advocate for the rural voices, and anybody who's an elected understands that if you're knocking doors to try to get people's vote or to get people's signature on something, you don't go to where there's 5 or 10 acre plots. You go into a suburban neighborhood.
Well, you also don't ask me to tell the government where I live any more times than I have to, or anything about myself, because I'll tell you no.
Well, you tell everyone you're from West Butler.
But not where. That's a big space. You'd have a hard time finding me in certain hollers. So anyhow, it did come up with the idea that this may be a little hard to convince folks, right? Just hogs, dogs, and logs, making the base case of IP reform that it should be hard to amend the Constitution. Folks got trigger shy on. So they wanted to add a bunch of bullshit in. They want to do clean Missouri.
Well, people have been working on this for a long time. And in fact, even Bill Eigel filibustered and killed IP reform back in 2019. Yeah. So it's not like this has been a new thing that has been difficult to get done.
Do you think you could make the case, and you're going to be seeing the whole state starting, hell, I guess Saturday morning.
Yeah.
I think you can make the case that people in Missouri it should be harder to change the Constitution.
I agree.
Without the bullshit. But Dean Plager sat in that chair, the guy you're running against. I was kind of impressed with him. He said, yeah, the Supreme Court said you could clean Missouri stuff. It could be legal. That's what we're doing. That's kind of what you're doing, right?
Well, I do think it's a little bit rich when they say you can't have multiple subjects when they literally taught all of us the play.
Such bullshit from the Democrats. I mean, just out of their mouth just flows bullshit on that.
I will say, like, hats off to them. Congratulations on being able to sell something like that.
It is not cornman level bullshit. The worst superintendent in schools history. By the way, you were right about schools. I was wrong.
I told you.
I was wrong. You were right. You were smart. I'm stupid. You're attractive. I'm very unfortunate looking. You have better judgment. I was defending Shitlick McGee here like a fool. Thanks to John Combes, by the way. Kelton, I'm telling you, when you come in Monday morning, you're going to be shocked at the glass case I have for my greatest gift I've ever been given. But
was it John who gave that to you?
Yes, but Amazing. It's a close second to this. Check this out. My buddy Danny from St. Louis. Is that perfect? Cardinals championship title.
Was that from when they won?
It's got to be because I mean. It wasn't from the last year and a half. I don't even think they'd make them now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got to clean Missouri this thing up. Some folks feel to pass it. The Senate had a long filibuster. It was just so. I really think Jim Lemke wasn't as involved early in session as he has been other times because it was such a disjointed beginning to the session with filibustering, Dan Hegeman, somehow about IP reform. I think if you watch it every day like I did, you kind of could get it. But if you didn't just watch every day, it was a poorly executed situation, very un-Lemke-like. And they ended up, you kind of passed something out to move it along again. And they were happy with that back in February?
In February, yeah. I mean, I like Jim Lemke. He's been a friend. And
smart guy.
I think that these procedural arguments are really hard for people to understand. It's hard for people to wrap their minds around them. And it gets very difficult for people to follow. And
they outfox themselves. They just worked themselves into it. It just wasn't, and they quit for a reason because it wasn't working.
Right. And interestingly, like I voted against stripping the language out before it went out of the Senate. I recognize that there's not another way out. My preference was to keep it in, but the body chose not to keep it in. And that was the only way out. And, you can recognize what is reality, or you can rail against what you wish would happen, and I choose to live in the world,
Buddy Joey from Joplin, thank you for this Oklahoma Stein. Reminds me of Carrie Engel, Oklahoma. So you passed out the SJR, sent it over the House.
Yeah.
And the process, I mean, I really thought, because I've heard, I don't know if this is, do you guys have a sheet that has your number 1 and 2, 3 priorities on it? I've heard some people say this is the top priority. I've not heard Mike Parsons say that. I don't know who the head of who decides what the priority is. I know this has been a priority, but so you pass it out in February.
Yep.
And fine, good deal. You got that done. Check the box. I'm sure Bill's going to be happy now. Wait, no. But then you send it to the House. And Dean Plager from the day he got elected has been talking about this, and nothing happens. Now, why? I guess I should ask somebody else this, but why do you think nothing happened?
I don't know. I really never understood the House or the caucus when I served in the House. I have no idea. I don't understand why it didn't move more quickly, but it didn't. And so you kind of, again, I wish it had, but you work with the cards you got dealt. And so we got it sent back, unfortunately, right before the budget and the FRA votes were teed up, ready to come. And that further complicated things. That was about 8 weeks after they got the bill. They sent it back to us. And so here we are.
So it's set forever. And then they pass it out at a bizarre time. The budget is very hard for the Missouri Senate to do. You have posers, you have whiners. You have to have rural Missourians and Democrats to pass a state budget. You just do. So in the middle of all this, while the FRA's up, I mean, honestly, you had to have John Rizzo to keep a hospital open in Joplin or Hannibal or Kirksville or Poplar Bluff. Without that, the Republicans would have watched their own caucus close all their hospitals and probably somehow clapped about it like fucking fools. But in all seriousness, in the middle of this debate, they choose to send it back over. Why the hell?
It's almost like it was designed.
These are not dumb people. They knew what they were doing. They set up this impossible situation. So after you guys actually do pass a budget in the FRA, then they go on the floor for a half hour before you guys. I hope most of you just left because I don't. That half hour was bizarre of Rizzo and Beck, not you, Flat Dog, regular 3D Doug, on the floor. And then you leave Thursday, you come back, and everybody kind of knows you're going to go to this on Monday, right? So you go, you make your case, you lay out why you want to do this, why it's important, and then the Democrats filibuster, as you had to suspect. So at that point, it's so funny. I think they think it's like Twitter, where you can say whatever you want and make your own rules to life.
And the AG will defend you for free?
Bizarro that. Holy cow. I guess it should open up, folks. I wonder if I can say stupid things he'll defend me.
I think you already were.
So we'll see how that goes in August. Worm can turn. So you get this on the floor, and you knew this was coming, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody didn't expect that they weren't going to do this. But one of the other changes that the House made, in addition to adding back the provisions that everybody wants to pass, you can call it ballot candy, you can call it, 90-10 issues that everybody agrees with. And one of the other changes that was made was saying that a standard had to be raised, not just for the initiative petition process, but also concurrent resolutions that come out of the legislature. And there are enough senators who feel like that process has enough vetting. There's public hearings, there's ways to change the language, you have to negotiate to get something passed, that it shouldn't have a similar high standard. And so at that point, once somebody's in the middle of a filibuster, you have three options. You can wait until the clock runs out on Friday at 6 and do nothing.
Let's walk through this, though.
Yeah.
The Democrats were going to filibuster this until Friday at 6. They had done it for 50-some hours.
They were the most rested people in the entire building because they had.
Well, because your own Freedom Caucus people were doing quorum calls. It's not the Democrats did not make you stay up all night and answer quorum calls.
They did not.
That's not real. Denny Hoskins got up early in the morning and did.
After not making, this is the other thing. Freedom Caucus members didn't make their shifts and used the list from the morning before to say people who were supposed to be here weren't here.
Do you think there's some folks that are loudly banging the drum, some in the Freedom Caucus or whatever, who would be fine if it passed, would be fine if it didn't? They just want to bitch about Cindy O'Loughlin.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's an easy argument to make that the public will believe that leadership is against you. That's a lazy argument.
It's lazy.
And it's easy to argue.
But do you think they're happy with that outcome?
But when you look at Cindy, it's hard to argue that she isn't conservative. Nobody's had a conversation with her.
It'd be like arguing you're not conservative. You're extremely conservative.
Better that I'm.
I think it's easier. It's easier to argue that you're extremely conservative than that you're just conservative or that you're not base conservative. So you walk through this, and the quorum calls start, and it felt like yesterday morning, some folks were like, "Okay, let's try to find a compromise here." It felt kind of like maybe you had a Fitzwater, a Koenig, yourself start trying to say, is there anything we weave through here and can do this through the typical manner? And I guess that just was like the Democrats, to their credit,
why would they have
compromised a lot this session? A lot of things have become law that they really don't like and versions of it. I think that they said no, and I think most folks were like, well, yeah, okay. So they said no. The compromise is you move IP reform to the ballot and you let the folks decide on its own, which is a compromise. They don't even want that, but they went with that. So then it felt like at some point, Senator O'Loughlin kind of became like Speaker designee O'Loughlin and started whipping a few votes.
I think that there is an interest for people to move forward legislation that the Republican majority wants. And I hear what you're saying about who called this the top priority. There are enough people who think that it is important enough to protect our founding documents.
If you and I
I'm one of them.
If we went to Kimswick and we walked around, went Antigua and had nice apple pie, and we asked people what IP reform was, they would think I was going to the urologist, right?
Well, I think they think you had a computer problem, ISP.
That's probably true too.
We're talking about
how many guesses would we get before they come up with initiative petition reform? I do agree. There's a lot of activists that care.
But not just activists. I think the average person is tired of looking at all of the changes that people want to make to their Constitution every ballot. I think that they think it's too easy to change the Constitution.
But they can lose sleep over it.
It's probably not as important as getting their kid to soccer. I hear you.
Or you've done tax cuts. I do think regular folks don't want to see taxpayer dollars go to fund abortion.
Yeah.
Even people that are like don't like talking about abortion, and you could say maybe kind of pro-choice, pro-life. I think that kind of rises us. It's like the girls, the transgender issue with girls sports. I think regular folks are like, oh, come on now. Damn it.
Yeah, let's just protect girls' sports.
Okay, so you do the negotiations. You go through, you check every box. Can't find a compromise. It came down to the point where I think you had some senators wanting to move a PQ motion. So you start off with Eagles 5.
Speaking of people who don't know what that means. So if your listeners probably do, but most people have no idea what is a PQ. So a PQ is a motion to force a vote on the previous thing that was made.
Break the Senate.
And what it is it's saying you have to have a vote where you no longer get to talk as much as you want because Missouri is
the free and fair debate of the Senate's broken.
One of the last chambers in the country that has, as long as your legs and your lungs allow, nothing's going to happen unless senators sit down on it. And so, you have to have 18 people to vote for something in order to do that, to actually physically say, I will vote to end their conversation.
There's a course in this process. Senator Rizzo was, I think most people say, a little misled by Senate leadership at the end of one session, and the concession for after doing it, as a way to say apologies, you had to have 5 signatures to even make the motion. Now you had to have 10. So they come out, and I saw some of the outside groups banging on folks, say there's only 9 senators willing to do it. Then they kind of took Senator Carter's name off. But
and then they put it back on. I mean, this bizarre. Is the thing. Here's
the thing: you had 5 Eagles 5 would jump off the bridge. If Eagle told those guys jump off that bridge, they'd be floating down towards Herman right now. So you have 5. Moon and Carter vote for it, right? Senator Rader was apparently pretty willing to jump in.
She thinks that we have a supermajority and we should use it, and I really agree. I understand that position. I agree with her that there are things that the public expects you to do, big Republican stuff, and so I respect her position on that. But even with her, even with Senator O'Loughlin, there were enough Republican senators who said, you know what, maybe I would consider doing that extraordinary motion. But the bill that came back from the House has a problem with the way that it was written. And I don't like that motion anyways. And so we're not going to do it. And so then you can either be upset and rail against, well, you should have had 18 members who are willing to sign a PQ. We don't get to create the world that we wish we existed in. The reality is there were not 18 senators who are willing to sign a PQ motion.
You have the 5 real senators, Senator Esslinger, she's made his turn her stuff. Then you had an old boy from Peach Orchard. And he had people from Washington calling him, and folks, your word means nothing in Washington. Doesn't mean much different in St. Louis. But in Peach Orchard, your word matters. And he's a senator. And he just decided he'd be a senator. Probably the proudest day. Doug Lively somewhere, his chest is swelling. It comes down to, I think you have consensus on, this is where I want to come back to. And I don't want to keep you because I know you have things to do. I've seen you take a lot of grief. And I do think the House played a role in this. What they say, tongue-in-cheek? It was almost a tongue-in-cheek effort by the House to actually do this. I do think the Senate made a good faith effort. I do think Flat Doug even compromised on a good faith effort. Take it to the public. It will be harder to amend the Constitution under this way. It'll be a challenge. You still have time. It's 1:30 on Thursday afternoon. The House could appoint conferees. They could take it up and pass it like you sent it back. House could appoint conferees. You could go through this process. Sure. You had a choice to make at some point that I want to break down.
Yeah. So my choice was to let the debate continue until Friday at 6.
Which means it's dead.
It could let there be a motion. You have 10 signatures, but you don't have 18 votes to move the previous question. So you make a motion, it fails, and session is over because the Democrats at that point will absolutely never sit down. And so there's no point doing anything. You just adjourn, or you keep the issue alive and you keep trying and you say, you know what, these policies are too important to play political games with. We're going to keep it alive for another day. You go to conference, and then there's still for us the same options that we had during the filibuster. We could still, at some point, make a motion to try to move the previous. You can still do things.
There's an HJR on the calendar.
There is an
under
HJR.
The rules of the Senate.
Yeah.
If it's so important, you could lay over the other HJRs, bring that thing up, and amend it, send it to the House. Yeah. I think there's a lot of different bills that are on the calendar still. We could keep working through them. We could have senators agree to lay over their bill that's ahead of it, so we could get to it, which does happen. The people tweeting about this, though, this is the end of days. The Republican Party's finished in Missouri. It's all terrible. It's the people that they support are the ones that won't lay things over. I guess there's been an element of kabuki theater this, I thought, from the beginning. And it does feel like on some level, so you're either afraid or you're just throwing a temper tantrum to take what you have, which is IP reform. and go to the public and see what they think. That's the truth. I think it comes down to two things. There are folks in the activist community that don't believe they can make that case to the people of Missouri without some of these distractions, ballot candy, 90-10 issues. I think they're all the same thing, probably. And then there's folks that just want to bitch. And I think a lot of folks want to bitch at Cindy O'Loughlin. And I think they're a little afraid to, so they want to bitch at you. And you're running for office, so it's a little more, you're in a little bit different box. I think it is, I hate to say it, pile of horse shit, but the truth is your decision didn't kill IP reform.
No, and it's not dead. I mean, I think that that's something that as we sit right now, it isn't dead. And if we had done what people on the internet are asking us to do, it would have been dead. And so I'm unwilling to make motions that will kill something I've been working so hard to pass.
And what?
And yeah, I don't know. I have to say, I don't know if it still has a chance. I don't know. But I know for sure that if I made the motion that they were wanting me to make, it would be dead. And so I think it's worth fighting for.
So right now, if someone comes to your office and says, let's work on this, your door's open, right?
Actually, it's not just open. I've been reaching out actively all morning.
I have seen you making the halls the last couple of days. And I don't think you were just checking on folks for quorum calls. I think you were trying to compromise your bill.
Try to find a way out. You're trying to find a way out. And you're right. We do.
Were you going to sign that PQ?
I was.
Yeah. I think there was, I think it came down to razor wire.
I did. I signed a PQ.
So I guess to me, there's 4 or 5 points here. I think the House was a little slow. I don't think that was a mistake. I think when they sent it over, I don't think was just picked a day off the calendar and did this. I think the folks that threw a fit early on got themselves in a box and looked bad and had to double down. I think the folks that are complaining now don't even want IP reform. They want to complain about Cindy O'Loughlin and attack her. They want to use it to try to win Senate primaries. So like more people to attack Cindy O'Loughlin. I think that they won't lay their bills over because they really don't want a solution. They want to throw a fit. And they want to blame you for something that they really wanted anyway. I really think there's a large folks that just want to complain. And if they can somehow blame you, because if they're saying, I saw this graphic of senators that we need one more senator to sign. Your name wasn't on the list that signed, and you had, right?
I had. But they
conveniently left you off. I don't think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
I think that's people intentionally being disingenuous.
Now, I will say I did not sign their list. They wanted an outside group and an outside senator to sign a PQ and move the motion and not have it be coming from the bill handler or the floor leader. And the reason why you have the floor leader make these kinds of extraordinary motions is because you don't have them fail, because it kills the bill you say you want. And if you're the handler and you're doing everything you can to pass a piece of legislation, you're not going to do anything that will actually kill the thing. And so what they're doing is they're taking a kernel of truth, which is that I made a motion that was not a final, truly agree and finally pass motion because I wasn't able to make that motion. The Democrats were filibustering it and instead made a motion to go to conference. And they're saying it's probably not going to pass and it's dead. But the truth is if I had done what they wanted, it for sure would be dead. And that's the end of it. That's the story. Now we have another 36 hours to see if we can't, pull magic or pull a rabbit out of a hat.
Your phone's on, your door's open.
Absolutely.
Would you be willing to accept going to the ballot just on IP reform and take it to the folks and see what they say?
Yeah, I think that at this point, it is so important that we protect our founding documents that we need to take a vote of the people. My preference is to still keep trying to negotiate to see if we can't use that House. If they're not going to grant conference in this House, then maybe we can use the HJR to try to continue to push something forward. But
there are rules, but the last 2 days you needed unanimous consent, and right now the unanimous consent's not from you.
That's
It's
right.
not even from the Democrats.
That's right.
Unanimous consent from that they're refusing is from the Freedom Caucus.
Well, and the truth is, again, to do something in the Senate, you have to have every senator agree to it. So whether they wish they had made a different agreement or made a different decision back in January to let the bill go the way they did, that was a decision that was made not just by one senator. 34 senators made that decision because you can't force a senator to do anything, or you can't force some senators to do something.
I have taken more of your time than that's where Senator Maryland's going. Thank you so much. When Chris comes it down, and look, he comes over, he's taking care of the kids, working. It's tax season. Where do you want to put him up to feel a good night's sleep and when you want to come back?
Well, I always stay at the Marriott when I need a room in town.
See?
And I know Chris, I think Chris, he's got a couple clients here as well, or comes visits me. He'll stay there too.
No doubt. United Fiber, thank you so much. We will see you Sunday for This Week in